All right, good afternoon, everyone. This February 21st, 2023 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck?
Here.
Councilors Verdick?
Here.
Afghan? Here. Corrigan?
Here.
Wendland?
Here.
And Boot?
Here.
And Councilor Rath is excused.
Wonderful, thank you. And now everyone, will you please stand and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fly over?
Okay, we're going to start with public comment. Just as a reminder, some of you have been here before. If it's your first time, or if you've been here before, we welcome everyone, and we are glad that you are here. When I call your name, please come up to the front. You can sit at either one of the two chairs here. There's 3 minutes allotted for each person's public comment, and there's a timer right there in the middle that has indicator lights kind of counting down the time, and I appreciate you paying attention to that. Okay, we are going to start with Mark. Mark Wadisky. Good afternoon, please.
Good afternoon. Is it okay if I walk? Because I want you to all see my limp.
But that, you know, the thing is that we have people that are watching and they can't only hear you. Yeah, but we see the limp.
So the limp is there, and I feel very grateful that I was able to play pickleball at George Rogers in a wheelchair for 3 months. And the community that was there was pretty amazing for me. Actually, several families, before I played even, when I was still on crutches, reached out and said, hey, why don't you stay with us? Because you live in a condo in Mountain Park, and you don't want to be going up and down steps with crutches. So the point I'd like to make is the community in pickleball is an amazing thing. And now, unfortunately, it's kind of evaporated. So, I mean, the community's there, but we don't have a place to play. So my request to the council is, let's find a place. We have a beautiful indoor tennis center that we just spent $2.4 million on. We could put some lines on there and put some pickleball courts in there. I know there is consideration about Westlake, and I see there are some tennis players here. And of course, the noise issue is going to come up again. So another option for that would be to put a cover over pickleball courts. I talked to a company called Clear Structures, and they said, oh yeah, it's about $500,000 for the size that we have at George Rogers. So my request is, let's figure out a way to be inclusive of the senior community with handicaps. We have a player who has Alzheimer's who can't keep score, but we help him with that. He still plays pickleball. We've got several players with cancer, recovering from cancer. So I think it's important to support the community of this population. So I have a minute left.
You don't have to use the whole time.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and sharing your comments.
You, Joe.
Thank you. Hey, Taylor Drake. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Buck and City Council. My name is Taylor Drake. You may remember me from last week. And I'm going to postulate something that may sound surprising to most of you, but please hear me out. And it's the fact that the Westlake pickleball option is the most expensive option for Lake Oswego. Now, I know that conversion is being looked at as the cheapest option, but when you consider that it's not just the city budget that is bearing the cost, it's actually the homeowners of Westlake that are going to bear the brunt of the cost in the form of a reduced property value that is, we'll hear more about that as we go on. but buyers avoid houses near pickleball. And you received an email from a Westlake realtor, Jennifer Noble, to that effect following the last council meeting. And, she documented how buyers avoid areas around pickleball. And reduced demand equals lower prices. It's just basic economics. And, I actually commented on K2 News to Steve Dunn that pickleball is kryptonite to home values. And not only that, the peace and tranquility of our homes and the very nature of the park will be decimated by a pickleball complex that will draw players from all over the metro area. That's a guarantee. The location of Westlake is in a location that it will draw from 10, 20 miles away, guaranteeing that those courts are going to be used from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Every hour they're open, they're going to be used to full or almost full capacity. So a decidedly attractive place to own property will overnight become unattractive. And the more research that we do on this issue as homeowners, the more we realize how much we have to lose with this proposal. It feels like a huge penalty on a small number of homeowners to provide free stuff. Now, I have nothing against my pickleball friends here, but they can also go to Rex. There are lots of places, more and more, there are places that are arising that are providing that particular service. And so it feels like a huge penalty to us in the value of our homes, 5%, 10%. We know there will be a discount if we want to sell, if pickleball is put in place there. So Westlake is the most expensive option when you look at all the costs. And I think we just need to admit that pickleball does not belong in a neighborhood setting. So let's do it right. We're too good of a city to come up with a non-solution that is just going to cause acrimony in our neighborhood and in our city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. We appreciate your comments. Debbie Sanchez. Good afternoon, ma'am.
City council members and community members. My name is Debbie Sanchez. I am a registered nurse and a member of the Lake Oswego Pickleball Club. I work in the second busiest ER, in Oregon, and so I'm very aware of the benefits of exercise on patients, or should I say the lack of exercise and social isolation on many patients. There has been previous testimony at city council meetings regarding the health benefits of pickleball and the said negative effects of pickleball on neighbors. From our participating in these meetings, I feel the scientific facts associated with the benefits of pickleball have not been thoroughly discussed, and I also feel that individuals have spoke about psychological distress without scientific data to demonstrate their testimony. I sent a copy of a research study conducted at Western State Colorado University to the city council members as published in the International Journal of Research and Exercise Physiology. This study demonstrated that after a 6-week study, there was a significant improvement in cholesterol and systolic and diastolic blood pressures and oxygen uptake. By 2030, it is estimated that more than 40% of Americans will suffer from some form of heart disease, with an annual cost expected to exceed $1 trillion. 80% of heart disease is preventable by what we eat, how we move, and the way we live. A report from the National Academies of Science pointed out that 1/3 of adults aged 45 and older feel lonely. 1/4 of adults 65 and older are considered socially isolated. COVID proved that even more so. Studies have shown that social isolation is associated with a 50% risk of person's premature death chance. Poor social relationships is associated with 29% increase of heart disease and 32% increased risk of stroke. Loneliness is associated with a higher rate of depression, anxiety, and suicide. Loneliness among heart failure patients was associated with a nearly 4 times increased risk of death, and 68% increased risk of hospitalization. Now, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you for a reason, because these are scientific studies that have demonstrated the effects of exercise or lack of and social isolation. Pickleball is a very social sport. In February 2022, pickleball was named the fastest growing sport for the 2nd year in a row. The number of one female pickleball player in the US right now is literally 16 years old. The number 1 male player is 20, and the current oldest pickleball champion is 90 years old. The sport of pickleball is not going away. The city of Lake Oswego needs to embrace this sport that is rapidly growing and join cities all over the U.S. to accommodate pickleball players. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Antonio Benvolio. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Mayor and City Council members, my name is Antonio Benvolio. I'm the co-president of the Lake Oswego Pickleball Club. We're here again talking about the closure of George Rogers Park due to a few people complaining that there's too much noise being made at the pickleball courts. I want to reiterate that no Lake Oswego municipal code was broken. Actually, the Clackamas County Code says that sound caused by organized athletic activities on property generally used for such purposes, including parks between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., are exempt from noise regulations. Why is that? Maybe because parks are supposed to have people in them, and when people have fun, guess what? They make noise. When Lake Oswego residents get together, much less pickleballers, they have fun, and they make noise. What a concept. What are parks set aside for? To have fun. We already have a nice quiet library. I've been there a bunch. It's great. But we shouldn't impose the same library standards on our outdoor common areas for anyone, much less our middle-aged and senior citizens. You just shut down fun for a large number, a few hundred Lake Oswego residents because a few homeowners want their surroundings to be nice and quiet, like a library. I'm sorry, but their surroundings are our parks, and I would expect you would promote fun in our parks, even if that means noise. So where do we go from here? I don't know, but I do know the City Council voted 7-0 to move pickleball to a new location. Parks and Rec said it would get done within 4 to 6 months, and so that would mean by the summer. The mayor noted that this was an internal request and promised to expedite it. We are over a month into that decision, so the promise of getting pickleball back for the hundreds of Lake Oswego residents should be well underway. We expect the council to abide by their promise, and we would love to get an update on how this is proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emily James. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Emily James. I live in Westlake, and I love the noise of the park. It is so great to, hear people having fun. Obviously, the noise of pickleball is scientifically different than kids playing in the park. I'm here, I live in one of the houses, one of the 2 closest houses. Both of my house and the other house that's the closest have young kids. And I have an email to read from my neighbor because she couldn't be here, the owner of the other house with the small kids. Hello, my name is Carrie Jones, and I live in one of the very closest homes to the Westlake tennis courts. I appreciate my neighbor Emily reading this statement on my behalf, as I am unable to attend today's meeting while traveling home from a trip. A little over a week ago, 2 people showed up to play pickleball in the tennis courts, despite being told previously that this was not to happen. The noise was audible in my kids' bedrooms and disrupted my youngest child's nap. I am incredibly concerned about this, as this was only 2 people in a non-competition level setting. So I can only imagine how disruptive it will be with multiple games occurring at the same time, including during competitions. We've lived by the park for 6 years and enjoyed the sounds of ball games and kids playing. And in all that time, the noise quality and levels have never been as disturbing as this. I strongly urge the council to find another non-residential location for the pickleball courts. Thank you for your time. And again, that's from my neighbor. And I just want to also add that I don't think anyone here that lives in Westlake is disputing the fact that pickleball and exercise is good for your health, or that social isolation is bad for your health. I think everyone agrees. I think that we just, it's not just a few homeowners. Like this could really disrupt our lives. Like we said, it will be hard to move because our properties will go down, but also the well-being of the people who live there. We're not gonna have a choice, to go somewhere else to play pickleball, or to go somewhere else for our kids to nap, So I hope that you guys can imagine if this was your house in your neighborhood and this was going to be moving across the street from you, and you'd be able to hear it all day inside your house, and what that would be do to your well-being and that of your kids. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. James. Cesar Gasteber. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cesar Gasteberu. I live in Portland, Oregon. I hate public speaking. But anyway, I'm here. I went to Lake Oswego High School when I was younger. My mom lived in Lake Oswego for about 30 years. My uncle also had a business here in Lake Oswego. I looked at the option of living in Lake Oswego. I am part of the pickleball group, and I play pickleball regularly with them. It's a lot of fun. It's very good for your health and whatnot. But what I see, one thing that I want to go backwards on, my mom, my uncles, they said as they got older, one of the things that was really bothersome to them is that people dying, other people passing away, but also that they were lonely. They didn't have as many people come around and talk to them, and didn't have that social outlet. And so when I think of pickleball, when I started playing pickleball, it's amazing how many older people are playing pickleball out there, people with past tennis skills or racquetball or whatnot. But I think it's so important for people's health. When I think about living in a park, I think about if I choose to live in a park, I'm going to listen to people having bands there, people playing basketball or tennis or whatnot. And I think it's a travesty to close something that's meant for the community. In Lake Oswego, I think you guys have 40 tennis ball courts, and there's no pickleball courts whatsoever for people to play pickleball. So it's something that you guys need to figure out how to get, rather than closing something down right away without having another avenue. It just doesn't make sense to me and so many other people that I talk to. I can't tell you how happy people are when they get together. All ages come together, from elderly to young people. It's amazing, the energy, and people remember their names. And like Mark was saying, he was out playing in his wheelchair. I thought it was amazing that people would get out there just to get out with other people, to go exercise. There's also other people, like they talked about, one of the guys in the group, he has dementia or Alzheimer's, so he doesn't remember his score, but does he get out there and play pickleball and get out there and enjoy other people? And, just his wife, Sophia, drops him off, and if you went and you watched people's faces and their reactions, there's so much positive energy out there. It's incredible. I encourage you guys to go experience it. A lot of you guys are younger, so you guys maybe don't play. Maybe some of you have played, but is my time up?
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Danny Rubin. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I had literally just got off a plane and didn't have time to type out my notes, but I did it on my receipt.
That's great.
So I'll do the best I can here.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I just flew into town and had to change my flight to attend this meeting. I tried to avoid the change fee. Unfortunately, that didn't go so well. However, this pickleball issue is too important to me and to my neighborhood, so I'm glad I'm here. I have lived in the same house for 32 years now. My backyard backs up to the tennis courts and fire station. I am an avid tennis player. I've enjoyed playing tennis across the street for so long it seems like an extension of my backyard. I also happen to play pickleball. I love pickleball. I appreciate and I admire how many people play. The popularity is off the charts. We all know that. It just simply needs to be done right, and it needs to be done away from a neighborhood. For 32 years, I've enjoyed walking out my backyard gate with their animals. Every morning, the quiet peace is part of the charm of where we live. The only sound I hear in the morning are the sounds of birds or the friendly hellos from other dog owners. I must tell you that as an avid tennis player, I've always been amazed at the amount of use of our tennis courts. In the summer, I've always arrived early to secure a court time, sort of my obligation to my tennis partners because of where I live. On occasion, I really enjoy helping out the girls' high school team practice in the spring 3 days a week. There are so many reasons why losing our courts and replacing them with pickleball would be unacceptable. We all know the pros and the cons. I would like to strongly urge this council not to destroy a wonderful, perfectly working tennis environment. Other than Washington Park, there is no busier public tennis venue. In closing, I'd like to say, please do not move a problem like we have at George Rogers Park and move the same problem to Westlake. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad you could make it here. Harlan Levy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Buck, members of the council. I wasn't planning on speaking again. My name is Harlan Levy. I spoke to you at the last hearing, but I did feel compelled to respond to some of the things that I heard here today. As I mentioned in my last testimony, I do play a lot of tennis, and I do play a lot of tennis at Westlake Park, which is very close to my house. I play there with my family. I play there with my friends. And none of us that are here today with our Westlake Park tennis player shirts are against pickleball. None of us. What we are against is taking a neighborhood park and transforming it into a pickleball complex, which is what is being considered here today. I would note that the pickleball players that were the Lake Oswego Pickleball Club, they're already playing. They're playing at the rec center. They're posting on their Facebook page all their games that they're playing there. So they are not without courts. This is a center that is dedicated entirely for pickleball. And they are playing there. So they have options, they have opportunities, they have a place to play. You also heard from the owner of the garages at the last hearing, who is in the process of working with his city of Tualatin, just across the border, literally feet from Lake Oswego, to install pickleball courts at his location. There are options to play pickleball very close to George Rogers Park, to Westlake Park. We are asking that you please do not destroy what is a great location to play tennis, a neighborhood park where people play tennis, and replace it with a pickleball complex that will be drawing people from all over the west side of Portland in their cars into our neighborhood to play pickleball. That is an inappropriate use of a neighborhood park. Once again, I want to close with how I closed 2 weeks ago at your hearing, when I said moving a problem is not solving a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else here who would like to give public comment but did not sign up? Okay. Okay, come have a seat and tell us your name.
Yes, Jan Sturdivant, living here.
Yeah.
It seems that we're getting pitted against each other. All right, you have community and you now have another community, and they're pitted against each other. Is that not embarrassing to how we want to be perceived in Lake Oswego? You're ending up right now 40 tennis courts, 0 pickleball courts. These other options are not for free. The sound mitigation that we did at George Rogers Park, you all have a tape. You know that 1 block away there is no noise. It was mitigated. You also know that you could have covered those courts and had no noise for those across the street. You have people voting that had a financial interest in this, breaking a tie and having it turned out to close the courts. It's flabbergasting. I would hope that the reason I moved here, because of this community being so caring, and your slogan of live where you play, you would try to figure out a solution within the remaining 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Sir, I saw you raise your hand too. Please come forward here. Please have a seat and tell us your name. I recognize you.
David Wisnakas. I spoke also 2 weeks ago and have emailed the council as well as you, Mayor Buck, so thanks for giving me a minute. I wasn't planning to speak, but I just wanted to say, going back to what I said 2 weeks ago, the City Council received a report about November 14th from a study team that you had chartered to take a look at what's the appropriate location for pickleball in Lake Oswego. In that report, Westlake Park did not appear because the study team, as I understand it, eliminated it because of the issues potentially with noise. There have been several of us that have looked at acoustic engineers and their recommendations on the distances from pickleball courts to residents, and those range anywhere from acoustic engineers from 300 up to 600 feet to mitigate all the noise. And the cost to put in really what is recommended for sound mitigation is quite high. My thought is I have nothing against pickleball. I agree with exercise and whatnot, but we need to have a better location, not Westlake Park, to move pickleball for Lake Oswego. The study team recommended their first choice, and could have used all this time from November if you had agreed with the study team to start the process to get an ultimate good pickleball facility built in the city that wasn't next to a neighborhood. So I just want to thank you for your time and listening to all sides and making a wise decision on what's best for everybody in Lake Oswego with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just on the process, I mentioned it last time. I appreciate all of you coming here and giving your comments. We take your comments and incorporate them into the public record on this process that we're going through. So we have the city's created a website on this process that has information someone asked about the updates, so that will be updated as the process goes through. This process involves hearing from stakeholders. It involves looking at traffic and parking and looking at noise, right? So it's a process with no predetermined outcome. The purpose of the process is to look at the topic and for the staff of the city to make a good decision, and then they'll bring that recommendation to the Development Review Commission, who will hear the results of the process. So just a note, but we appreciate you all coming here, and we take your comments and incorporate them as part of that process. I don't like to respond to every little thing, but I do like to correct misinformation. The city of Lake Oswego, the city, as a municipal corporation, we have two tennis courts currently at Westlake and one tennis court outdoor on South Shore Road. And then we have the tennis center. Those are the tennis courts we have. Now, within Lake Oswego, there's HOAs that have tennis courts. The school district has tennis courts, but the city has really one site with at Westlake, the other on South Shore and the tennis center. Just to correct that, we do not have 40 tennis courts in Lake Oswego. What's that? Seven total, including okay. Okay, thank you all for coming. Okay. Any prior, okay. Okay, so moving on to the,
I don't know if I'm out of turn in this. I'm sure you'll shut me down if I am. With respect to comments, off the tennis court part, but there has been comments that have been made about financial advantages and conflict of interest. And I will say that as an elected official, you are elected and you are representing everyone. And I think there's been some misaccusations about having a conflict of interest. When you do get elected, people do elect people for lots of different reasons. And I just want to make it very clear that in this case, there really isn't any conflict of interest with any person on council. And I will go on record as saying that. And occasionally we do get asked if we have personal financial interests in something. We do declare it, but I will say that in this case, and in the cases that I've studied, we're all free and clear. So anyway, that's
Thanks,
just my
Councilor.
comment.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight is item 5.1. It's an agreement with Lake Oswego Rowing Club Foundation at the Charlie S. Brown Water Sports Center. We have item 5.2, it's authorizing a payment to the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, for the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act program for the wastewater treatment facility project. And we have item 5.3, which is approval of meeting minutes from October 18th, November 15th, and December 6th. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. Okay, moving on to council business. We're going to start with the 2023 legislative session priorities, and we have Ms. Thiesing here to talk to us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I'm Madison Thiesing, Assistant to the City Manager. Tonight is a follow-up from the January 3rd City Council meeting when I first introduced the start of the legislative session. I'm bringing forward a proposed 2023 legislative agenda, which is included in your packet. As a reminder, for every long session, we recommit our legislative principles, and we also prepare a set of legislative priorities. The principles do not change based off of the session and are the foundation of our advocacy efforts. Those are, as you've shown in the council report, the three primary overarching principles are to preserve home rule authority, avoid unfunded mandates, and leverage regional and state partnership. In the council report, it goes further into our legislative priorities, which are shaped by the landscape of today, as well as your city council goals and existing adopted plans, such as the climate equities plan, the comprehensive plan, and the transportation plan, things like that. And then also that they are responsive to the legislative session and the issues that we're seeing at hand. Top issues right now that we're seeing, and this was affirmed by the governor's budget, is related to housing and homeless services, education and childcare, and mental health and wraparound services. So a lot of the bills we are seeing are directed towards that. It'll be interesting to see if that stays the laser focus as bills continue to move out or start to move out of committees right now. So the priorities listed within the strategy are to advance the City Council's goals and our future vision. As you see in the agenda, they are in alignment with the 2023 City Council strategic goals and initiatives. So on one column to the left is the goal and the initiatives, and to the right within the packet shows what are the actual points that we're going to be opposing or supporting or neutral on. Things like community preparedness. We're really going to try to look at what kind of grant options could there be related to community preparedness. Things about wildfire, urban interface, what type of programs are happening at the state level that we could advocate for at a higher level. This also transcends in issues around land use and tolling and transportation, things that are really at a regional or state level that we want to make sure we're advocating on behalf of the city. So with that, just as a reminder, so today's legislative priorities are for your nod, essentially, to say that this is in alignment with what you're envisioning for what the city's advocacy efforts are going to look like. City staff will be tracking bills. What I've done in the past and what I hope to do forward is that we will either support a bill, oppose a bill with an FYI to City Council once this legislative priorities is blessed by you all. Or if there's been topics that Council has previously given direction on, so I'm thinking about the tolling discussion, that has been a topic that we've talked to a lot in this setting, so I understand where you stand on that. things like Eric Olson will be talking about the housing needs strategy and things like that. So we've gotten your feedback at various times as policy directions, so I will use that to inform some of our stances on some of the issues in front of the state. So with that, as I shared, we will move forward with the different staff liaisons for these different policy areas. We will move forward with opposing, staying neutral, or supporting bills, and then sending it as an FYI to City Council. If there's any issues that are at a higher policy level that either Council would like to have a greater discussion, we can facilitate that in the coming months, or if there's briefings needed depending on the regional bodies you sit on. So I'm looking definitely at the mayor right now with the Metro Group, C4. If there's topics that we want to flesh out and discuss in a setting, we can also bring that to council for further direction as well. Moving forward after this presentation, I will be coming back at the second meeting of every month through the end of session so that we can stay up on topic, questions get raised, bills that you want flagged or more information on, then I can follow up with. So that's just the snapshot of how this is going to go for the next few months. Right now, I think it's over 2,000 bills, and things are moving fast. But they're also very laser focused on certain topic areas. So we want to be mindful and responsive to the needs. So with that, any questions or comments?
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Stacy?
Okay.
Wonderful work, yeah.
It's very good work. I'll share what let me pull up my little thing here, what the mayors are working on. So this year I'm serving as vice chair of the Metro Mayors Consortium, and so we're heavily engaged in lobbying now that the legislature's in session. We have, so we meet, the mayors are meeting every week, or our executive committee, and very focused on bills related to housing. So there's kind of there's a -1 amendment here to House Bill 2001 that we're following. That's focused a lot on youth homelessness, especially, but also has some negotiated policy on tenant protections. The state's wanting to kind of extend some of the eviction protections that we saw during the pandemic and support giving people the time to get their rent paid. We also have, that may be of interest to us, or kind of carving out another exception for executive sessions related to public bodies having to meet about safety or security in the public space, or cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cybersecurity threats, making sure those are clarified as an okay topic for executive session. And then there's funding for the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, which is the agency, of course, that trains all police officers throughout the state. So they're looking to increase that funding. We all know they've had a severe backlog. It's really prevented departments from getting new officers into the pipeline and out onto the streets. And then another big topic has been the funding of, well, broadly it's the funding of addiction services, but relates to the taxes and doesn't really impact us. So we don't have any marijuana dispensaries here, so we don't receive any taxes from marijuana. But the cities that were receiving taxes from the cannabis, they had that funding pulled when Measure 110 passed, and so now some of them are short a rather large bucket of money that they had that they were expecting. And then, of course, there's questions all around about how that money is being spent. So there's efforts to really look at Measure 110 specifically, and how the and whether or not to redirect cannabis tax back to the cities and find other ways to address the well, in general, just to address the really dire needs of recovery services, that are needed here in the state. And so that's a big topic that seems to be kind of in flux. And I'm trying to think. And then the tolling discussion, there are no bills on tolling thus far, but so really it's the cities of Clackamas. So we're working very closely with the other cities on and working with our good friend Senate President Wagner on getting them to take action this session, and the cities are really united around this, and really thanks to the staffs too of all the cities in Clackamas. They've been fantastic. So that's something that we're working on right now. We're working hard. So It's really good coordination between the elected officials, folks like Madison, and all the technical staff, engineers. Everyone's doing really good work together in a short time, because these things, it's moving real fast, so.
And I thank Will Farley and
Yes.
Director Rooney as well.
Yes.
So this is really a nod of if this is the direction that everyone's good with, they're comfortable with, okay. Any questions or comments before we move forward? Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks, Madison.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will see you next month.
We'll see you next month.
We'll see if you can condense 2,000 bills down to this 4 pages.
I know. God.
I thank the League of Oregon Cities.
Okay, we now have under consideration here ordinance 2891. This is adoption of findings. This was an ordinance of the city amending LOC chapter 50.01.006. This is non-conforming uses, structures, lots, and site features. And LOC 50.07.004. This is additional supplemental requirements. And the findings. So we will have Attorney Osenek give us an intro to this topic, please.
That was really good. Osenak, but it was very close, Mayor Beck.
Getting used, I'm going to get
Just,
it.
for everyone's benefit.
Every day I write it down.
As you said, Mayor, Ordinance 2891 and the associated findings for LU 22-0008. You all heard this ordinance and looked at the underlying findings at your last meeting. At that point, you all amended the ordinance to remove sections that related to affordable housing and middle housing. And the new ordinance reflects those changes as a majority of council approved them, and the associated findings indicate that the removal of the exemptions for middle housing and affordable housing are due to the fact that those issues are currently under consideration, and in fact, you'll be hearing more about that on your agenda item 8.1, your housing needs analysis, your housing production strategy, that because those things are moving along, a majority of council in the findings, we indicated that they preferred to wait on those matters before addressing, if at all, exemptions for middle housing and affordable housing. So at this point, the ordinance reflects accurately the changes you all made last time and is ready to be adopted should someone so move.
Wonderful. Thank you, Attorney Osenek. All right. Is there a motion to enact Ordinance 2891 and adopt findings for LU 22-0008?
I move to enact Ordinance 2891, adopt for LU 22-008.
And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. All right. Ms. Linda, will you call the roll, please? I'm sorry. Is there any discussion? Okay. Call the roll. Thank you.
Mayor Buck?
No.
Counselor Burdick?
Yes.
Counselor Afghan?
Yes.
Counselor Corrigan?
Yes.
Counselor Wendland?
Yes.
And Counselor Mboop?
No.
Okay, motion passes 4-2.
Thank you, Ms. Linder. Okay, now moving on to item 7.3, we have the 2023 City Council Initiatives Work Plans.
You
A
guys
lot of
are
work went into that.
you guys are rolling today, so well done. I'm not going to talk very long. I think what you'll see in the work plans, remember, first of all, this is just our commitment to making sure you understand that we're going to deliver on the agenda that y'all set, and how it's going to roll into the budget process. That's the other thing I think you need to see as part of the work plans. The other thing I outlined in my staff report is you see the level of detail in the work plans reflects the level of detail we have in terms of the direction the council is already set. So some of the work plans are relatively vague because the first step is coming back to all y'all to make sure we have the correct policy scope. Those work plans will then get more refined. The other thing I would just like to note from a high level, well, I guess there's two other things. One is, some of these obviously are monitoring projects, and whenever you've set something to monitor or track or do oversight, we assume we're going to come visit with you quarterly about those projects. So North Anchor, the LORAC, the golf course, you should see us about once every 3 to 4 months giving you a report on how those projects are going, unless something causes us to come back sooner. And then last but not least is you'll also see April and May look like really busy months. September and October look like really busy months. The mayor and I will smooth those curves. So just because a lot of stuff is proposed for council study session in May doesn't mean it'll all happen in May. It might happen in June as well. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I think you get the gist.
Councilor Winland.
Well, first of all, I want to thank City Manager Bennett for doing an outstanding job, because I will tell you, I know your senior staff worked on this along with you, and it really articulates where we want to go. And my only thing with council's direction, and I talked to the mayor briefly before the meeting, is that I know we put this for 2023, but a lot of these things are going to, the pressure for this council cannot be to have this all happen, because we're going to have like 9 meetings in December, and if that happens. And flattening out the curve a little bit with our meetings and so on, I'm fine going into January, February of next year with some of these, if need be, just because we've got the goal setting for 2024, you know, we won't be up to speed and so on.
Well,
So,
as you all know, most of these are 18 to 24-month projects in reality. So some of them will get finished in 2023 because they started in prior years, but some of them, even if we start them this year, they won't get finished for another a year and a half or so. So,
Right.
And some of them I think will probably be on your agenda forever. It's just a question of what phase we're in. So things like the sustainability plan, you'll probably always have that on your agenda. It's just a question of what the piece of work is that you're going to be doing in the coming year. So yes, thank you for that, Councilor Wendland. No, you will not be finishing them all in a single year.
right. And there's no pressure so that we have to have 90-minute meetings, so.
No, it's
Thanks, Councilor Winland. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Ms. Bennett. Yeah, it's very good.
thank you.
It's going to be an exciting year ahead, filled with good things. It's good. It's fun reading those plans. Okay. All right, so now we get to have a study session. Next item on the agenda, item 8.1.
Are
This
you
is-
need to make
oh.
a motion?
Oh, do we have
to
to
adopt the plans?
this?
There's a motion.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry.
Motion
Oh,
to
well,
adopt
all right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the work plans?
the work plan, so move to approve the, I don't see here, yeah. Move to approve the work plans for the 2023 City Council initiatives.
Second?
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, everyone. Okay, and now we move on to item 8.1. This is a housing needs analysis update and housing production strategy. And we are glad to have Mr. Olson, our senior planner, presenting on this. And we have Andrew Parrish joining us via Zoom. And Mr. Parrish is a senior planner from the project consultants, MIG.
Thank you, Mayor Buck, and good afternoon, councilors. My name is Eric Olson. I'm the long-range planning manager with the city here of Lake Oswego. I know that some of you might not be acquainted with me, so just wanted to get that out of the way. You might be seeing a lot of me this year at the council. I think it would be nice, Andrew, if you can share your screen. We have a few slides to go through, and he'll be sharing them from his side of the configuration. All right, thanks. All right, so tonight's study session is really just to go over House Bill 2003. It's been a while since we have really spoken about this. I think the last time was in June of last year. So a bit of an update on where we're at, what we've been doing with this project since then, as well as just going over a proposed public involvement plan and getting some direction from you all on that. So the presentation tonight will include project consultants, or just one of our project consultants, rather, a representative from MIG, as Mayor Buck pointed out, and he will be giving an outline of our sort of work so far on House Bill 2003 and an overview really of the bill. And I think it's a good opportunity for you to ask some questions of folks that have worked on these types of projects in numerous different jurisdictions throughout the state that might be able to provide some context. So the presentation will also cover a proposed public involvement plan and include an update on the progress of the Housing Production Strategy Task Force. Just as a quick reminder, the city is required to update its housing needs analysis by the end of this year, December 31st, 2023. And then basically we're required to adopt a housing production strategy within 1 year of the adoption of the HNA. So it sort of depends on when we adopt that first HNA piece in terms of when the HPS would be required. Council first prioritized this work last year as part of their 2022 goals and initiatives, which included continuing the multi-year work plan to complete work on key housing initiatives, including HB 2003 compliance. And with that, I'll hand it off to Andrew Parrish, as I mentioned, with MIG, who will talk a little bit more about the bill itself and what's required.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm also joined by Matt Hasty with MIG. He is the project manager for this effort. He's here to answer any tough questions that go over my head, I think is what we're here for. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation that's pretty similar to one that we gave to the Planning Commission earlier, I think in last month, and talk about the project, talk about where we are now and where we're going, and answer any questions that you might have. So a quick overview of House Bill 2003 and kind of the general status of housing as is required by the state of Oregon for jurisdictions. So House Bill 2003 was passed in 2019. It is intended to make sure that communities across the state meet the diverse housing needs of Oregonians. And as part of that, it requires cities over 10,000 in population to analyze what housing is needed for current population and for future residents every 6 to 8 years. So this is an ongoing kind of effort that, that cities need to do. And it requires a separate housing production strategy within a year of completing the analysis, which is going to address the specific actions that the city is going to take to meet those needs that were identified. So there's kind of the crunching the numbers analysis part, and then there's the policy question. And there is a lot of overlap between those two, but that's kind of how they're defined in the statute here. So the housing needs analysis, again, is an assessment of housing need and housing capacity in the city of Lake Oswego, and it's got a 20-year planning horizon. And it includes a buildable lands inventory, which we call a BLI, and a housing needs projection. So the BLI is what land is available to the city, both within the city and kind of in the immediate surrounding areas that might be under the city's planning jurisdiction or conceivable future planning jurisdiction, and a projection of the housing needs currently and in the future. And I think this graphic sums up basically how they come together. So you've got your demand side, you've got your supply side. There's an analysis that that looks at those in relation to one another. So do you have an over or under supply of land that is likely going to meet housing of certain types or overall? And then we have a set of potential strategies to meet any kind of surplus or deficit that you find as part of that analysis. So, so the project that we're working on was basically we're kind of in the left side of the screen currently. We're working on the projection, we're working on the buildable lands inventory, and with the Planning Commission and the Housing Task Force, we are working kind of through these steps here. A little bit of background about what a buildable lands inventory entails. This is a graphic that we call the supply funnel. So we're kind of narrowing in on the most relevant pieces of land in the city. So we start with all land in the UGB, in this case, the Metro UGB, and within the city limits. We take out land that's not residential, so land that's zoned for commercial uses, for employment uses, institutional, et cetera. We're left then with land that is just residential. And at that point, we take out land that's, you know, might have a residential zoning designation, but maybe it's committed for religious institutions, fraternal institutions, public facilities. So we take that land out of the inventory. And then we look at land that is, basically what we're left with is vacant land, or land that is maybe infillable, or maybe land that is redevelopable. And we take out land that is, you know, wetlands and floodplains, has steep slopes, has some kind of environmental constraint on it. So finally, we're left with unconstrained land. We make some assumptions about whether future land for streets and other infrastructure is going to be needed. You know, if it's a large parcel, we're going to want a street network to connect through there. So we don't want to account the whole thing as kind of viable, developable land. And so eventually, after all these steps, we're left with net buildable acres by zoning designation in the city of Lake Oswego. Within that land, there may be things like constraints to the ability to supply infrastructure, or it might be property owner willingness, or it might just be market drivers that prevent some of this land from being suitable residential development. And so that's kind of the bucket of things that we are going to look at to identify potential strategies that the city might undertake to allow some of this land to be used to meet future housing needs. So, so that's kind of the BLI in a nutshell. I'm going to cover real briefly the housing projection side of the equation, and then I can stop here for any initial questions that you all might have. So the housing needs projection, we have another consultant on the team, Johnson Economics, to do this work for us, and they've done work, similar work for a number of jurisdictions in the metro area and throughout the state. But we look at population growth as expected by the PSU Population Center primarily. That's the body that and the Metro Urban Growth Report. Metro has a population forecast that they do for their member cities, but we also look at the most recent census data, American Community Survey, any other information we have about what population growth is expected in the region. And we also look at market data. So we have RMLS data, we have some third-party kind of rental and sales data like CoStar, cities, counties, state data that make their information available. We use that to look at how to identify housing needs, and we also use the latest point-in-time homeless counts and any data along those lines to identify those sorts of needs as well. And so we try to get a holistic picture of, again, what the community's housing needs are, what the land base is to accommodate that, and then we have essentially a policy discussion of what those what the difference is there and what that might mean for you all. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any initial questions from the council at this time.
Mm-hmm. No? Okay. No, you're doing a great job. Forge ahead. Okay, will do. So as Eric mentioned, after the this initial kind of analysis is done, a housing production strategy is required. And apologies for the amount of text here, but essentially there are a number of components that are required as part of the HPS. The city needs to do a little bit more work contextualizing housing needs. So that what I've just described is a fairly generic kind of look at what a community's housing needs might be. This is the opportunity to take a more detailed look at needs and barriers at any underrepresented communities that might be in Lake Oswego. There are certain public engagement requirements that basically say you need to have meaningful participation from both the consumers of housing and the producers of housing. So we'll do a robust engagement effort as part of that. And then the city needs to look at strategies to meet the the future housing needs. So those strategies need to have a timeline and some implementation details and how much impact they're expected to have. The state also requires a description of fair and equitable housing outcomes. So we need to look at maybe the locations of where this housing is supposed to occur compared to income, race, any other kind of equitable data points. And they have a pretty robust kind of prescriptive way of how to do that. So that's part of the equation as well. And then the report needs to have a conclusion that kind of wraps this all up and says, and therefore the city of Lake Oswego will do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we're going to measure our progress going forward. So it's a iterative and recurring process that the city is going to be undertaking. So I'm going to pass it over to Eric to talk a little bit about the work plan for this process, and he'll take it away here.
Yeah, I just realized we might want to also do another pause just to check in if there are any questions on the HPS piece of what Andrew presented just now before we move any further.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no,
Go ahead.
No, I just, it's before, like when you talk about the net buildable acres, do we have a number, an exact number, like to see how much land do we have, or are we going over the urban growth boundary? Or are we just talking about Lake Oswego inside, nothing beyond? And if it's the case, how many, like what's?
You know, we're still doing the work right now, so it does sort of depend on some of those assumptions in terms of the deductions that we might take from the overall supply. But in terms of your question related to where we will be looking within the urban growth boundary in Lake Oswego specifically. We're not really tasked by the state with looking outside or looking at, expanding the urban growth boundary, though, of course, we can talk if that is a direction that we decide to proceed with. I think we'll see a number of alternatives that may have a lot less barriers to implementation and maybe a little bit more effective. So I'm not sure that we'll be focused on that necessarily, at least based on the direction that we have so far.
Eric, it might be useful, though, for you to talk about, we're not the only community that's going to be doing this at the same time. All of our neighboring jurisdictions are also going to be doing it. So do you know yet, maybe you guys do, Andrew, whether there's an idea about some regional coordination on these housing needs analysis? I happen to know from my past work at Metro that everybody does their own HNA and then Metro does its forecast, and never is there a reconciliation process. So I don't know if there's any thought about that. I guess I do think we're not an island. We need to think about ourselves in the context of a regional housing market.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with the sentiment, and I don't really have an answer as to how jurisdictions, individual HNAs and HPSs like aggregate up to the Metro level. I do know that Metro conducts, or at least has conducted, its own look in the past and decided, we do or don't need to amend the regional urban growth boundary, and then individual communities kind of make an ask and say, we face this need and we have this documentation, and therefore our community should be one that is ripe for a UGB amendment. But we're fairly early on in the process. I see Matt has shown himself on screen, so if you have anything to add, please do, Matt.
Sure. I'll just note a couple of things. One, we kind of start with housing or with population projections that are coordinated with Metro and all the cities in the region. They go through sort of a series of meetings with staff from those jurisdictions to come up with that initial allocation of population amongst the region. So we kind of start with that. The other thing I'll note, but I don't know of a process right now that occurs where they kind of go back and take all this information that's part of all the housing needs analyses that all the jurisdictions in the region, or even kind of sub-regionally, and put it back together again. I don't know of a process like that. But moving forward, not now because the rules are sort of still in process, the state is going to be taking kind of a different approach to projecting housing needs in the future. That's going to be done through either the State Department of Land Conservation and Development or the Housing and Community Services Department. There's going to be this sort of coordinated forecast statewide and among jurisdictions across the state, but we're not in that process yet. So down the line, you may see more of that coordination, but for this round, we're sort of still using the rules at hand. So hopefully that didn't muddy the waters too much. So we kind of start with a certain amount of coordination, but it doesn't come back together so much as far as my experience has been, for better or worse.
And just to respond to the earlier question, we will have an actual number as far as net buildable acres in the city of Lake Oswego. We're not there yet. We're still at the early stages of the process.
Hopefully you can find a lot of empty acres in Lake Oswego, but I don't think you're going to find them. So how do you go about when you say that you're trying to do equitable housing outcomes, we have like a higher senior population in Lake Oswego. And are we trying to change that? When you say outcomes, are we trying to change the mix? Is that part of is that what we're supposed to be doing? Or is it just providing within the mix that we already have opportunities within some of the things that they've been talking about? Does that make sense? I mean, are we trying to change our population, or are we trying to, what are we trying to do? What's the net result of this? Let's just say you add 1,000 units. How do you decide, how do you target those?
Right, I think that is a great question. Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Of course, we will do our best with the housing needs analysis, really to take a look at not only where the city is at currently in terms of population, but that projection of where we anticipate being 20 years down the road. So we're not planning to, deliberately change the makeup of the community in any way, more just trying to plan for what we expect to happen in those 20 years and to accommodate those needs. Now, as you mentioned, with senior housing or folks that want to age in place, I think many of us know anecdotally or just through our own experiences that is a need here in the city, and we fully expect that to be reflected in the results of the housing needs analysis. So we will have some data sort of showing a breakdown of the need and what that looks like for different demographics.
Okay, great. And then the other part on the housing task force or the engagement piece, when you say producers, does that mean like builders and developers, or what is a producer?
Generally, yes. Folks in the building industry, so real estate, developers, people in the construction industry. It's basically just ensuring that we can identify barriers that they may be coming across and work to address those if that's the direction that we choose to take.
Right.
No, Eric, I would add both market rate developers as well as kind of people who specialize in developing affordable housing. It's kind of a specific group of folks that have specific kind of input and needs.
Right, but I guess what I'm looking at is, I totally get, we've got 3 projects going on now for, that between Merrillhurst and the 2 on Boone's Ferry. We also have a project going on on Cruise Way, which is more apartments, things like that. And I don't know, do we have all those people at the table that are trying to provide that type of housing, or do we have regular builders that are looking at taking a lot and figuring out how to put a duplex or a triplex on it?
It's a great segue into the later part of this conversation. We do want to get some input on who we ought to be bringing to the table here. We've got a section on the public involvement plan for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess we can move forward to the work plan section now, unless there are any more questions.
Please go ahead.
All right, I'll keep moving then. All right, so we've updated our work plan a bit. Again, we did present this back in June of last year, but it has been a while, and we know a little bit more about where we're going to land in terms of certain dates now. So really just wanted to provide an update. We have proceeded well into this work plan so far. So you can see that we've sort of began work last year on the projection of housing need and the inventory of the buildable residential lands. I would point out that we'll actually be able to review initial drafts of that at an upcoming study session with City Council that's scheduled tentatively for April 18th. So that is our intent, really, just to kind of really hit the ground running after this study session and start talking about some of these details in a lot more specific sort of terms. We've also been looking at just analyzing our residential land needs and just looking at other components that we will be including in that H&A document that will be distributed on the 18th, or for the meeting on the 18th, rather. Other quick notes on the schedule: we want to make sure to maintain regular check-ins with the City Council and Planning Commission prior to the housing needs analysis being considered at a public hearing. And we're also doing the same sort of as we proceed through the HPS work. So we'll transition really from the housing needs analysis into housing production strategy late summer, fall of this year, start talking about how to address some of the deficits or needs that are identified through that H&A work. So really it's a 2-part project here, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that HNA piece in the coming months here through summer. I think I'll hand it back over to Andrew to talk a little bit more about the public involvement piece of our proposed work plan and what that looks like. And just just to note that we're looking for some direction here on the public involvement piece. So just if you have any advice to give or any direction, we'd really appreciate it on this.
All right, thanks, Eric. So this effort is really guided by public engagement. It's by check-ins with elected bodies as well as some appointed bodies and the broader public. So the main group that we've convened is called the Housing Task Force. And they seem like a good, diverse group to help work through all of these issues. So we'll be regularly checking in with them, showing them draft materials, getting their input, revising materials, and the expectation is that they would recommend our final documents to Planning Commission, and those would wind up before you all. We also want to have a number of public workshops and open houses, and what proportion of those are kind of in-person events, and which of those are going to be online. That's still kind of to be determined, but we think it'd be pretty good to have some both online and in-person events where we discuss kind of the overall needs of the city and potential strategies, and get kind of a broader public look at what the city's looking at. We can do a number of stakeholder interviews. So in these projects, we typically find local builders, local developers, local affordable housing, again, producers and consumers, and other folks that might be identified that'd be good to talk with about issues related to housing. We've got a project website that will have all of the versions of the public-facing versions of the documents available. Hopefully some friendly and interactive materials kind of describing the issue of housing statewide and what Lake Oswego's role in that is. We'll prepare some other materials like FAQs, fact sheets. We often do presentations like meeting in a box style, where we can go either talk to a specific group, that could be a Rotary Club, it could be a renter focus group that's convened for some other reason that we can bring these materials to, just to get kind of a real quick 15-minute, 30-minute kind of discussion about housing issues with. And these are the folks that have been identified so far. We know that there's a builders advisory group that the city has convened. There's a group of affordable housing stakeholders. I think neighborhood associations are a good set of folks to bring some of this material to. And so our question to you all is, who else do you think really needs to be involved in this conversation? And what are the best ways to reach them, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd just add to that of course this is somewhat dependent on what strategies we end up going for. So, I'm guessing that we'll probably not be incredibly interested in how to produce more single-family housing. I think we were meeting those needs in the city currently for the most part. But certain developers might focus on the types of housing that we are wanting to promote a little bit more in the city. So it might make more sense to harness our efforts in those ways.
Right. Councilor Wu.
Okay. I was thinking like for the stakeholders, what I don't see here is like we all employ folks who don't live in the city, and they, if we could have a way of having them, because probably people who work here, police, in our cities and other businesses, they probably would love to be able to live here if they could. And maybe listening to their lived experience would be important in the interviews. So,
great, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And I'm very impressed by what you folks are doing. Honestly, my heart is happy that you're doing this. Honestly,
Yeah, it's it's work that we've been talking about doing for a few years now, and I think, you know, a lot of people are just excited to finally see some of the results of this work. So we will be able to discuss more of those numbers and that sort of net buildable figure in a couple months. And I would just mention that even if we're going to be here at the council sometime in April, we will actually have drafts of that HNA document by mid-March or so. So they'll be out in the public, and we'll have a chance to discuss that here at council at some point as well.
I don't know how you get there's one group that is the older seniors that I've heard since my time on council is the people that want to downsize, and I don't know what you call them, downsizers. That's one group that I think would be very interested to have input, because we need those family homes with lots of bedrooms for younger families, but nobody wants to leave Lake Oswego. Well, I won't say nobody, but they don't want to leave Lake Oswego. So what is the alternative for them? And that's, I don't know what kind of, it's probably not the 50 plus. They may not, but I don't know how you get a hold of that concept. But that's one group. And they're pretty silent, because they don't see, I think they would be excited if there was a product out there that they could go look, and then that would drive them to do that. So I'm not sure how you get them engaged.
Yeah, I mentioned we do have some folks from that perspective, if you will, that are on the Housing Production Strategy Task Force. But in addition to that, we can also do a focus group or something and work with the 50 Plus Advisory Board to get a good list of folks to reach out to, subject to council direction.
I think the other group too, other stakeholder group would be like the school district. And we did, Councilor Boop and I had the same thought on the local workforce, involving them, and also the director of the chamber emailed us earlier, I think also had the same thought and volunteered to help us kind of coordinate that effort. So it was good.
Yeah, these are great suggestions, very helpful. Thank you.
Councilor Wetland, I think your suggestion with 50 plus advisory board, 50 is the new 40, but I think that team is shifting to even change their name, because they're focused on the seniors, and it would make sense to also have a meeting with them. And if you need any help, I'm the liaison to that team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think overall, Eric, you've done a great job, and MIG team putting together a good group. I mean, I have to say, when Eric and I looked at when we did the outreach for the task force, we had a ton of applicants. And it was great to see the wide variety of residents who wanted to participate. Many who have never been involved in anything in the city before, but this topic of housing has lots of people interested. And so it's a very good group. We've just had one initial meeting, but they're going to do good work going forward. It's very impressive. But I like that these different stakeholder groups that we're looking at, both the current and future residents of the city, and those who are also a part of our community, but maybe don't live here, but would like to. And I think as a community, we've always been a community that, thinking back, that's been people of different backgrounds and mixed income, different ages, abilities, everything we like to see in a healthy community. But cost, is making that grow more homogenous. So I think that we have on our council goals, preserving the character of the community, and that's the goal that this work is responsive to. And I hope that character that we're preserving is stated in that adopted community vision from our council goals. It's really preserving it through like an evolution of the built environment here, and really identifying that need for us to intervene more to encourage and support the diversity of the community's population, that is both here now and will come in the future. And I think we've created a good process here for us to do that. And but it's a big task, and we look forward to this work that we have in front of us this year. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you've already sort of spoken of many different initiatives and ideas at this body that could sort of be included within the envelope of this project. So I know that there will be a lot of thoughts and opportunities to discuss this further sort of later this year when we start talking about the strategies. So it could get quite wide in scope, but I think it could be a good way to do it.
So when we had like the development down here, the North Anchor, where we have mixed use, I mean, are we trying to get, I mean, I think one of the slides showed changing in commercial to residential or, you know, that type of how you get some additional housing. And we had the Mercado project, and there's different projects. Is that group represented? Is that somebody, how do we get developers or make it, I mean, and is that part of the inventory to say we have these spaces available?
It is, and you know, we're obviously, you know, when it's a mixed-use development, you can't count on 100% of the allowable floor area to be residential, so we have to make some assumptions about the proportion. But yes, that is something that we're going to be focusing a lot on in terms of the inventory, and of course, there are potential solutions that could involve, you know, opening up lands for residential that don't currently allow it. But you know, when it comes to housing needs, in particular, multifamily housing is often the type of housing that's, you know, seen as more affordable than you know, other types of housing, and so there's a lot of potential to meet our needs with a focus on that housing. And I think that's the approach that we sort of took in 2013 when we first developed our housing needs analysis. So we're really updating that document under this kind of new framework for House Bill 2003. But you know, we obviously have middle housing now as well, and there are lots of opportunities to sort of explore there as well. So, you know, there will definitely be a look at mixed use and multifamily housing, but, you know, we're not necessarily limited to that either.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Olson. Okay. And thank you, Andrew and Matthew.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more into the year. Okay, now, information from council. Anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Is this on the commissions and boards?
Yes.
Yes. Planning Commission talked with me, and they were not very pleased to hear that we dropped the affordable housing and middle housing from the non-conforming ordinance that we were writing down. I explained to them our logic, and they also went online and listened to the meeting. I wanted you to know that. Also, the 50+ advisory board, as I mentioned, they're looking at, are they really 50+? Is that too wide of a range? Or is it really seniors that they're very focused on? And they're having that conversation, and also they're very focused on what if we have an emergency? How do we do the outreach to the senior citizens and help them stay healthy for a few days till the emergencies are figured out? So those are the two updates I had for you.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. That's great. Councilor?
Yes, my two commissions, I think the Library Advisory Board, they're working very hard with the task force, you know, to explore avenues for a new library. And new, even now, there are more ideas of many centers around Lake Oswego. I heard that one. So I'm glad to be there. And also for the Youth Advisory, the Youth Leadership Council, we went to Lake Oswego, to Hillsborough in the Youth Summit. It was wonderful. Our children we were proud to be from Lake Oswego. They were really shining there, and it was wonderful. And The mayor was with me, and we have Jamie and Madison who coordinated that. It was amazing. We responded to questions as elected officials, and they like us. They even invite us to come and talk to the DEI advisory board in May, I think. And so that, and we had a meeting with the parents for the Washington trip with our youth, and it's also, when people do good things, my friends, they did a very good thing, PGE, yeah. So, no, I'm not, I don't criticize, I also recognize, and, I asked them to help the youth, and they did it. They registered all our youth to the trip, to DC, and so it's wonderful. I think it's, I'm happy today to sit here again and say thank you, PGE, for that, and I hope they will do more so that I won't come here again and I'm never negative on them. They give us light and energy. But that's, so yeah, and we met with the parents of the children who are going to DC with the mayor, and they were very happy, and so your city is working. I'm proud to be here. Oh yeah. Because Jamie and Madison, and I told them that Councilor Verdict is going to, so they say, oh, for they.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Verdict.
I don't believe I mentioned this at our last meeting because things went a little bit long, but there was a meeting, an initial meeting for the Public Arts Master Plan to get updated. The plan is from 2016, so there was an engagement meeting, and at that meeting, we just kind of talked about what the purpose is, where we wanted to go, and how to get the community engaged. So that process has been kicked off.
Great, thank you. I'll give an update on kind of the regional bodies here. I was appointed to serve as the Clackamas City's appointed me to serve as their rep on JPAC, which is cool. So we talk about a lot of the same. We've only had one meeting so far, but we've been right now. I've talked about it before. The 2023 update to the regional transportation plan. They're in their call for projects phase. So Lake Oswego and all the other all the cities in the region, but in Clackamas County, we're focused at C4 on the Clackamas cities, of course, and we've all put forth our projects. So Lake Oswego does have a project list of plans from our local TSP. There's 3 buckets, the projects that, the highest priority basically, that we think there's money to fund. The middle priority that if we're really lucky, there'd be money to fund. And then the bottom list, which is, pie in the sky. And then all of those projects will kind of get put together into the regional transportation plan, and then there's more funneling that gets done based on how much money there actually is, and that's where there's, obviously competition in the region for projects in different areas, and why it's good that we're at the table fighting for all of Clackamas and our neck of the woods too. So that's kind of what's been going on there. So lots of focus on that update to the 2023 RTP. There's a project going forward too, not in our neck of the woods, but over the Burnside Bridge. They're going to be completely rebuilding the Burnside Bridge, and JPAC recently adopted the preferred alternative to the plan. They're making it seismically safe and adding bus lanes and max capability down there on the Burnside Bridge. So big project. And let me think here. Yeah, they're going to be able to run the max.
Huh.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with the Trillium Bridge then?
Well, what's that?
With the Trillium, whatever the other bridge that has.
Tillicum?
Tillicum.
I think it's actually future. Like it's going to start. I think they have. They're thinking of it's bus rapid transit
This-
and then down the
The
road.
steel bridge is at capacity, the steel bridge, and so if they're ever going to add any additional rail service anywhere in the region, they've got to address the fact that the steel bridge is a bottleneck. So if the Burnside could be retrofitted in the future, it could then take future projects. Wish I didn't know that, but I do know that.
It's like a $2 billion bridge.
It's a, yes, yeah, it was.
Okay. figure.
TriMet shared with us that they have at the top of their list, and I think this was on the projects for the RTP, but they are going to repair the trussels and tracks on the shoreline, which is great news. Because those trussels have been in disrepair for a long time. So TriMet is stepping up. I don't know. I can't remember what the cost was on that, but it's big news. Then I wanted to share, we have, as we all know, and of course he's not here today, but our Community Development Director, Scott Siegel, we have this Distinguished Service Award to present him with, and we're wishing him great congratulations as he moves on to be the Planning Director at Multnomah County. But I think we can all agree that the team that Scott has put together here in the city planning department is phenomenal. And you can always tell the strength of a leader by not necessarily how loud they are, but by the caliber of the team they support. And by that measure, Scott is as strong of a leader as we can imagine. Not only his vast knowledge of city planning that has helped create much of the community that we know today, and he built on, of course, what came before. But working with Scott over these years, I know many of us have worked with Scott in different capacities in addition to being on the, as members of the council. But it's been a true honor and pleasure, and watching the way he interacts with others has been inspiring. So he's an outstanding ambassador of Lake Oswego as a city organization, and he really sets a high professional bar, which is exemplary of the type of the standard that we see exemplified by so many of our team. And they do lots of work out there in the public, and they really represent us well in all corners of the region. So kudos to Scott, and we wish him well. And we'll present this to him in absentia. What we're thinking. Not feeling well today. Okay. And then, so I'm so sorry to be talking. I have one more thing. So we'll have on March 7th, the council is going to hear an appeal of the DRC decision about a conditional use permit for the Lake Oswego School District bus barn. There was a lot of input that was received before the DRC, and we want to be able, as we always do, to hear from as many people as possible. So under the authority granted by the LO City Code, I'm proposing to change the time limits for testimony on this AP 23-01, LU 22-0052 to 5 minutes for neighborhood associations and 2 minutes for individuals. In addition, I'm going to propose not allowing neighborhood associations or individuals to testify using audiovisual aids such as videos, photos, PowerPoint presentations, though any such materials folks may have could of course be included in written comments that are submitted in advance. And as a reminder, this is all an on-the-record hearing, so all of this is already, that people would be submitting is already in the record for us to review. I think these procedures are going to be necessary just due to the, as I said, the number of persons and entities eligible to testify, and we want to be able to hear from as many folks as possible. I just want to make sure everyone, does that sound good with everyone?
We're starting early.
Yeah.
Good, all right.
4
And
p.m.
Are we going to do the time seat, to put the, how much on the time seating thing? Can we do that? Are we allowed to do that? The time
Taking the
seating?
time? No, we determined that folks are allowed specifically by the code to cede their time.
Okay,
So
up to,
as long as the total time does not exceed 10 minutes.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're going to do then. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, Ms. Bennett.
Thank you very much for recognizing Director Siegel. I think that was really lovely, so thank you for that. I just wanted to let you all know, you probably read an article in the Oregonian this weekend, and if you didn't, you should, about House Bill 2889. We are tracking it. I think you heard from some of our consultants that it will, actually what's going to do is going to create a regional, or an annual statewide housing forecast, and then a state department is actually going to allocate the expected housing production. Is actually going to create a list of cities that are exceeding targets in terms of producing a housing and cities that are not doing so well, and then ask for essentially performance improvement plans from the cities that are not doing well. We're tracking it not only because we're concerned about the unfunded mandate that it might represent, but also because absent funding for infrastructure or other kinds of support services, simply issuing another report on our inability to produce housing isn't really going to help us produce housing. Also, there have been a number of attempts to amend the proposed bill to include requirements that would force cities to annex properties for housing, even if it's outside of our existing urban growth boundary, which probably is specifically directed at Stafford. So we'll keep you posted on that, but I just wanted to let you know if you've been reading about it, we are tracking it and we're very active.
Yeah. And if you're interested, there is a, I think, yes, or maybe it's today in the New York Times, read about what New York has underway also. I mean, this issue of housing production is not unique to Oregon and other states, but it gives a good preview of where things could be going with the governor as proposed over there. Okay, all right. So with that, we are now we're going to kind of be done with the broadcasted portion of this meeting, and we have an executive session that we're going to move into. And with that, I will ask City Attorney to read us the legal parameters, please.
The Lake Oswego City Council will now meet